All right, so the market's chopping around a little bit. We've had the really good upside move. We then started to see kind of the flush. So the content production thing has slowed down because I don't really see the point of kind of doing too much analysis through this region. The markets have been up only. We've had a dip. If you want to buy the dip, then you're looking at buying these regions. If you think that we're going to get lower, then you're just holding back or you're staggering your buys. It's like a pretty self-explanatory market scenario right now. And the only thing we're really speculating on is there a deeper pullback or is this it? And I think once you've had those discussions, I don't know what else there is really to dive down deeper into. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll produce this video. And I recorded one the other day, but it just feels as though, I know I was not particularly clear on the voice side of things. I even said in the video, I was like, I've just had this sneezing fit and my voice sounded really thick. So I thought, well, I'll just go in. I've got some time now. Let's just get it recorded and do the 2024 predictions and thought process. So the prelude to this is that these are just predictions. They're kind of just where my thoughts are at the moment and where I think that, we'll see some breakthroughs or some nuances in the market that I think we'll experience over the course of the next 12 months. And, I think it's probably worth pointing out that my predictions for 2023 were that it would be all doom and gloom and it would be terrible for everything. And I very quickly had to address those original narratives in March because everything was consistently up. We didn't just have kind of like the rally and then turned around. There was, by the time we got to March, there was a real shift in the dynamics of the market. And so therefore had to kind of react and respond appropriately to that. So, take everything here with really a pinch of salt. It's just to give you an idea of, some of the narratives that I think will potentially have the ability to play out. So we'll start off with number one, and I'll just bring these onto screen here. So the first one is that I think that AI remains in a bubble. So I think that the AI tokens will continue to be very good bull market assets. I think that spot exposure to those markets will still be very lucrative, and I still think there's a lot of potential upside for them. If you look at markets like FET, I think that it's one of the best monthly crypto pictures that we have in terms of the chart and the TA perspective. It's a very, very attractive higher time frame market. And then when it comes to the equity side of things, I also think that AI stocks are going to continue to perform very well. It's still this kind of relative unknown. The area is going to be moving very fast. There's always going to be new things that are kind of knocking at the door and looking attractive from an investment perspective. And I suspect you'll probably have a pretty good time if you kind of stick to that field and that area and really kind of upskill and absorb as much knowledge as you can from that field. We know certainly from a crypto perspective, we'll have all of the subcategories of AI tokens, and the more that you can kind of ingrain yourself in understanding that eco and, getting to grips with it, knowing the new releases, knowing which tokens, that's going to be, I would have thought, very beneficial in 2024. The next one, I think ETH outperforms versus the general expectation of the market. And this is really a kind of a Twitter related point, but I think that ETH will significantly outperform what people think it will do. Now, we already know that quite rightly, ETH has got a kind of a very negative tag on it for now because of the performance that it's had in 2023. And that's completely understandable. The cross comparison with BTC or Sol, obviously it's a very weak market if we're talking about kind of, represented gains versus others. I think that 2024, I don't know if that situation changes. I suspect that it will. But I think that ETH will have a far better performance cycle than many people will give it credit for. So I think a lot of people have slowly started to move away with their ETH exposure, whether or not that be kind of more back into BTC, whether or not that be spreading around other alts now, whether or not that be kind of, like L2 stuff. I think more and more people have kind of started to withdraw from ETH in the portfolio. And obviously the last kind of like 2 months in particular have probably really cemented that approach for a lot of people. So I actually think that given that we've got all of the noise and the discussion around the BTC ETF, and that the ETH ETF is probably next on kind of the list of talking points for us after everything is confirmed, fingers crossed, positively with the BTC one. I think all of the narrative turns to the ETH one. And from my perspective, I still think that ETH actually represents really good value in the zone that it's currently in. I think that it's still at a really kind of attractive price point, and in terms of longer holds, ETH at 2200 still kind of feels cheap to me. So from my perspective, I think ETH is going to outperform, certainly versus the expectations. I expect it will probably be like quite a salty environment if that situation develops, because I think a lot of people will sacrifice their ETH exposure in favor of other things. And I think that ETH is a kind of a majority or a weighted portfolio holding of a liquid major will be a very strong performer in 2024. God, I'm going to hate looking back on that one. All right, next one. Sol outperforms versus ETH and expectation and is hated. So even though I believe that ETH will have a very good run, I think that Sol will do better. I think that Sol will get to levels that many people would deem unrealistic at this point in time, or potentially cope or hopium. I think that is what I'm thinking for the next 12 months for Sol. So I think it outperforms ETH. I think it becomes essentially the new ETH in regards to price action. And I still don't think people have their expectations high enough for where Sol could potentially trade to. And then I also believe that it will be hated. Okay, so that much really isn't too much of a reach to say that Sol's going to be hated, because we saw how much it was hated already from a rally from 20 to 75, and I just think that kind of frustration towards Sol will continue, which will also probably help in terms of propelling price higher. I think there'll be lots of narratives along the way of why Sol shouldn't be trading so high. We're going to have people underwater that finally have the opportunity to exit at a better value, and I think that we'll just basically continue churning higher and force those people back into the fold. So I think Sol has a very good 2024. Again, I don't really feel as though that's kind of a reach to say. I would say that's probably the general consensus. Maybe I should be taking the other side of that thought process, but as it stands, that's the thoughts for 2024. Now, I've got 10 points here, but the next 3 are essentially all one. So I'll bring them in piece by piece as I discuss. I'll just slightly alter this, just because I want to make it a little bit broader. Got to make sure I'm maybe half right on one. So a AAA gaming studio implements some form of crypto technology within gaming. That's the general thought process here. I think that 2024 will bring the first true invasion of crypto into the gaming space. I think that's probably going to happen because we're at a really nice intersection of frustrated normie gamers with game devs, studios, etc., and crypto gaming, NFT ownership kind of having spread and sowed its seeds in the first cycle, and now potentially having the ability to kind of influence some on that side. Now, I still think that this is going to come from a AAA studio perspective, an existing traditional gaming publisher that will implement crypto and will have the ability to appeal to the normie audience. I do not think that a crypto game is going to break into popular culture. So I don't think it's going to go that way. Now, I think that there's an opportunity for it to essentially kind of work from the other way around, where I think that if normie gamers are onboarded through a AAA publisher into a game and into the crypto ecosystem, and then they begin searching for titles within the space, yes, maybe. I think that's probably a far more likely outcome than a game breaking those barriers down. So I've had this thought for a couple of years, and I still firmly believe that adoption will come from a AAA side, a traditional studio side, and then work backwards and trickle down into crypto as a result. And so what I believe is that essentially we'll have a gaming gold rush. And what this looks like is a traditional studio picks up some form of crypto tech. Now, I suspect that this is going to be kind of like infrastructure perspective. I think that assets, etc., are going to be, encased within the game. And I think that this is going to be infrastructure perspective. So whether or not this is going to be something they're going to be operating on, a certain ecosystem, what it might be, someone's going to build something out, they're going to take something out of the box and fit it in. And that's where I think that the implementation comes from. So the infrastructure side, I think, is more attractive. And that's what's going to start this gaming gold rush, which is where once one studio has done it, and fingers crossed players respond positively, then I think that it will start to pick up steam. And so we'll start to see a lot more studios suddenly having to get a solution in place. And we'll probably see a lot of very poor execution and poor implementation. And then we'll probably see in 12 months' time, half of those companies throw everything away again because they did such a bad job in determining what they needed. And they really just did it as part of they've done it, so we need to do it process. So I think we'll get this kind of like gaming gold rush where everything will just be pumping and companies will just be throwing money around to do shit. They'll be picking up all sorts of, projects, infrastructure crap, and we'll have that. And then, as I said, I'm sure in, 12 months' time, later on in the year, we'll have a period of time where we start to see lots of tokens coming back down in price as companies are throwing things out. And then lastly, we've got this one here, which is, all kind of tied into one point. But gaming infrastructure is what I still believe performs best. But essentially that rising tide lifting all boats. So if we start to see traditional game studios get involved in the crypto space, then I absolutely expect every token within kind of a GameFi bracket to start moving very positively. I don't think you're going to kind of get an underperformance there. You might get, in terms of your beta, you might not be at the same level, but realistically, I think that the market as a whole will respond very positively to any major breakthroughs that we see in the traditional space. So really, I think gaming is a big focal point, but really infrastructure-wise versus an independent project, obviously with a few exceptions. Parallel doing an incredible job, absolutely unbelievable job. And obviously, Oh Baby is, releasing good news after good news with crazy partnerships from a crypto perspective. So we've got some outliers. And I think if you're looking at what has the potential to break the mold, it's going to be those two. Probably Parallel first, just because of the kind of slightly removed crypto nature of it. And so you have more of a kind of a traditional gaming experience without the kind of inside crypto relevance attached. So, yeah, I mean, there are some examples and, we'll see. All right, next up. Portfolio allocation to tokens that have not yet experienced a bull run perform strongest and provide the simplest returns. Again, not really much of a major reach here. Kind of half advice, half prediction. But, we've got lots of things that, as of right now, have experienced this passage of positive price action, whether or not you want to call it a bull run or not. What I'm talking about here is a sustained period of uptrending market action, not just 2 months. I'm talking about the next 18 months. And I think that the easiest portfolio allocation that you can have is for tokens that have not yet experienced a passage of time like that. We speak about this quite often on stream, and we have done over the last kind of 12 months when the markets have been shit. And, the question question that people always ask, what are going to be the best performing alts in the next run? And the answer is always usually the same, which is the best performing are going to be the ones that either haven't been created yet or haven't experienced a bull run yet. And so usually they go hand in hand. So those tokens that we're seeing now that already have significantly outperformed, you see stuff like TIA, you see stuff like Audi, lots of those markets that are performing incredibly well under the current conditions that still haven't really experienced any significant length of time in terms of uptrending markets. And I think from just a simple portfolio allocation perspective, looking towards having a portfolio centered, or at least an allocation of the portfolio centered around those markets in which they haven't experienced those conditions, will probably yield very good returns. All right, next up. BTC volatility will slow down and price action will become less interesting to trade. So I think over the course of 2024, what we'll see is probably BTC price action that is more a case of grinding up and to the right with less volatility and less interest in terms of speculating on, probably a better holding asset. And we'll just start to see kind of that volatility dry up on BTC and hopefully transition to alts for all of us that are, actively trading in the space. So that's where I see us going on BTC. I think that with the introduction of everything that is, again, fingers crossed, coming, then I think this will produce essentially poorer trading conditions for the average person on BTC, with less interest in kind of like the major swings, more stability around BTC, and then less interest in terms of, speculating and trading on. So I think BTC will just be upwards, slowly to the right, some dips every now and again, and that's it. I don't think we'll kind of have the same pace of volatility as we have historically been presented with as we venture deeper into the future of BTC and the role that it will play. So I think that, from my perspective, is kind of a volatility slowdown, and then we'll see from there. All right, last couple now. Let's do this one. So DEXs will grow considerably in volume and will be the preferred trading location for many. So I think we're already starting to see kind of like the rise and the popularity of DEXs increase. I think there's still quite a lot of work to be done on that side of things. Liquidity perspective, order execution perspective. I think some of it's still really fucking janky, but I still think that this area for many is going to be kind of the number one trading destination for people. I think the ease of access, the ownership, the control, and the kind of the distrust that we have had since the FTX saga, I think will kind of, continue and manifest, and people will have alternate options, and I think they'll take advantage of those alternate options, and so we'll see a large growth on the DEX side of things. And then lastly, I think in terms of traded products, I think options will see the largest growth in 2024. I think that this is an area in which obviously I'm very passionate about. A lot of people should be spending more time, because a lot of people would do significantly better if they just traded options contracts instead of futures. And I think that this is a really good opportunity for someone to move into the space and to provide a great range of crypto options to enable, exposure to lots of different things over varying periods of time. And we'll see what that looks like, even if this is a case of somebody providing a simplified option structure in terms of saying just, I think the asset price will be higher than X by Y. Done. Nice, simple process. But I think that the options route will very quickly grow in popularity once we have products in the space which are going to meet the needs of the traders. And for me, I think options will be a big one in 2024. So that's it. Nothing too crazy there. Probably the strongest one is the ETH outperformance versus expectation. That's probably the one that will raise the most eyebrows. I think everything else is probably in line with other things that you would have read at some point on Twitter, and really kind of, not expanding out too much in terms of getting too crazy with those predictions. For me, the GameFi thing is important because I think I can structure a lot of the 2024 portfolio around that thought process. I can begin establishing positions now. I feel relatively confident that that space will have a good 2024 ahead. So again, infrastructure-wise, primary. And then from there, it's really just a case of thinking about major exposure. So whether or not that's going to be ETH, Sol, and whether or not this list of thought up narratives and nuances for 2024 will actually come true. Obviously, the more information that we get into 2024, the more we'll have an idea on whether or not the thoughts at this point in time will materialize, or whether or not, just like 2023, I'll be way off the mark with that and have to force myself into an entire bias and personality change in order to take advantage of it. Which I guess is also the important thing as well, you know, despite the thoughts that you may have. And probably the most popular one is that 2024 is just a golden year for crypto, because we're just talking about continued bull market, ETF approval, and all of these things that at this point in time make it look like crypto is going to have this wonderful year ahead. So one thing to just keep in mind for everybody is the ability to adapt, making sure that it's not just a case of, you know, everybody said this at the end of 2023, so that's what's going to happen. If it doesn't materialize, if the charts, if the news, if the discussions say something else and the environment changes, you have to be ready to adapt and not hold firm to those, you know, those thoughts presented at a point of potential euphoria and happiness in the build up to Christmas and prices being elevated. So let's see for the time ahead. And if this is the last content you ingest of mine pre-holidays, then I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. And I will, of course, see you on the other side.